This is Kelly Joe from Red Rocks Community College, and we are so lucky to have Penny Benson with us tonight. Penny just moved to the Denver area. What was it, like a year ago or so?
No, not even
Not
September.
even? Wow. And we discovered you and can't wait to start working with you and all of your magic. So we just wanted to invite you for a chat to talk to us about your puppetry. I know you've got some images to share with us and everything.
Yeah.
Um, where would you like to start?
Well, I figured I would start the way I start conversations with clients. And it always starts with, why a puppet? Yeah, I want to build you something, but if it doesn't make sense for it to be a puppet, there's no point, right? So that's how I start all my conversations. So I'm going to switch over to my slide presentation,
Great, great.
and there it is. Why puppets?
Nice.
So when we start, now it would help if I knew how to work my. Doesn't seem to want to advance now. Before it was advancing when I did anything.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay, here we go. So when we talk about, oh, it's going all by itself. Oh gosh. Hang on. You're getting a preview.
Getting the preview. Don't look.
Don't look. I'm going to stop the share. I don't know what's going on there. It's going all by itself. Let me just see. I'll just talk to you and see if I can fix it.
Yeah, no problem.
So when I talk about why puppets with a client, obviously it's focused on them. But we're getting to know each other, so I figured I'd start with why puppets for me as well.
Absolutely.
And now if I can get back to share with you, I've fixed this slide presentation and now I can't find you. Ah, technology. You still see me, right?
I could do it on my side.
All right, now I gotcha. Oh boy. Okay, so
we love technology.
Oh yeah. When we talk about, when I talk about how I got into puppetry, I think I may have to leave this.
That's all right.
I started out as a geeky kid, theater kid, and an artist. My first identity, I guess, of being anything other than just like everybody else was when I realized I could draw and my older sister couldn't. So I was like, ooh, there's something. So I always had this kind of feeling like I had some artistic ability. I was into theater as a kid. But when it came time to go to school, my parents were like, we'll put you through school. So I had that privilege, but no, not art school. No, not theater school. Because I was like, would it be theater? Would it be art? Would it be theater? Would it be art? And they were like, no, neither. So I became a nurse because I also have that side of me, very nurturing, caretaking, and I loved science. So I thought, okay, I'll be a nurse. I did that for a while. It turned out that I was good for it, but it wasn't good for me, that kind of thing. And I really needed to get back into the art. So that's where the graphic arts came in. Went to school for graphic arts, did that for a while. Started a family and then started doing theater on the side. And very quickly that rolled into professional theater. And so it's like, how do you make this journey and then become a puppeteer of all things? Because I would tell my acting friends, yeah, I'm going to grad school. And they're like, yeah, great. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not for acting, for puppetry. So it was pretty interesting, but it was just a collision of my worlds. So I was doing a lot of acting, probably too much acting. I would spend my spare time, if I wasn't looking for auditions or learning lines, I was online trying to learn how to make molds. And I didn't even know why. Why was I interested in making molds? Why would I ever need that? But I was just so into it. And around that time, I began to work with a mask company. And we had this production, Three Cats of Venice. It was a brand new production based on a short story about three cats and a mouse and this young boy who played the violin. Anyway,
Hmm.
I was the mouse. That's me there in the center.
Nice.
And we had a lot of interludes where there was, I wasn't involved in the script writing, and there were a lot of places in the script where we were talking about things that was happening off stage. I was like, this is a show for little kids. We need to have something happening. It can't just be talking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to have some shadow sequences. Now, I had never done, really any shadow puppetry, but I figured, how hard could it be, right? So I whipped up some shadows. This is Tommaso here playing the violin. It was very sophisticated puppet made from cereal boxes.
Wow.
I mean, it just shows you what you can do. And he plays, and it was a lot of fun, but it really was probably the first professional puppetry I had done. And at the same time, I was trying to get involved with this company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called Underground Railway Theater. They had a touring program, and they had main stage productions, and I could not get an audition to save my life. I mean, like, I even showed up with my resume. Hi, I'm Penny, and I sent you this, but I figured, oh, no. I learned later on that probably the problem was that the person who was the head of the company was like in the same age range as I was, and she did not need me. But one of the people that I knew through my acting circles was in this company. He was working actively with them. And he knew that I was good with my hands, that I liked making puppets. Actually, he was involved in the Three Cats of Venice project. I had brought him in on that. So he said, you need to come over sometime when they need something done and the puppeteer that's here doesn't want to do it. He said, I'll just call you. So he started doing that over and over again. He would call me in, and I would come in, and I would do emergency repairs of things, and I would paint, and I would sew, and just got my foot in that door. And lo and behold, when their puppeteer went out on a premature leave for having her baby, they shoehorned me into everything she was doing. So suddenly I began touring as a puppeteer. I was eventually, you can see this puppet up here. The designer's name is David Fichter, and he's married to the woman who owns the company, who's the director and the main actress. And he's very, very talented, which is why I really wanted to get involved in this company, work with puppets, work with masks. But so these are all his designs, but eventually he got to know me and trusted me, and I got to paint this blue puppet in the upper right-hand corner. And then finally I got to sculpt this puppet down in the right-hand corner. And so I was learning at the same time how to do things. And their lead puppeteer, who had gone out on leave, eventually when she came back, we got together. We were going to do a workshop, and she came to my studio, and I had done some puppets for some other people, really learning as I was going. And she was kind of quizzing me. It was like an interview. I mean, here we were supposed to be working jointly on this project, and she's asking me all these questions, and comes to find out she's doing a production, and she knows this woman named Julie Goel. And I'm like, I know Julie Goel. And she said, nobody knows Julie Goel. Yeah, but I did. And this is a woman who was a commedia artist, a director, a puppeteer. She lived in Maine. And I had met her at a conference because I had taught theater too. I skipped that part. But during all of this acting and learning about puppetry, I was teaching theater in K through 12. So I had met Julie Goel at a conference and fell in love with her because she was just extraordinary. So we start talking about Julie Goel, and she's like, so this is my friend Faye. She's just like, that's it. I've made my decision. I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, well, I'm working on this production with Julie, and I want you to come in on it with me and be my partner. I'm like, I'm a beginning puppeteer. I don't know what I'm doing. She said, great. You're an actor. You can get me out of the shop, and you help me with the acting. I'll help you with the puppetry, and it'll be great. Wow. So that was the production of Star Sisters, and her name is Faye Duprat. She runs Foreign Landscape Productions. And so we produced this, we toured up to Canada, we had a great time, and now it's in mothballs and up on my shelf. You can't see me right now. Well, later you see it. So this
Puppets
show's
are
no longer
beautiful.
touring, but it was a really great project, a life story, kind of First Nations creation myth. About two young women who travel to the stars. They're sisters. They travel to the stars, fall in love with these star men, have a baby. The one has a baby, and then they realize that their parents need them back on Earth. So it's a full circle kind of a story. But it got me looking at things a different way in terms of performing with puppets, because we were live characters on stage. We would kind of move in and out of the characters as well as the puppets. We had these girls in two different scales, and then ourselves also moving into the roles. So it was a great opportunity to not be hiding behind puppets, to be fully present on stage with puppets. And that was my first introduction to that kind of work. The other thing that Faye introduced me to was the University of Connecticut. She had gone to school there. It's the only school, I believe, still in the US where you can get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a Master of Fine Arts in puppetry. And we went there to use their facilities because they didn't have a working shop. Mine was minuscule. So we went there, and I met the director of the program, and he invited me to come in and take classes. And I said, well, I'm not writing a book. I'm not getting an MFA. And of course, in the end, that is indeed what I did. All of the classes at that time, all of the people in your year would be in competition for the show in the slot, the one puppetry slot at Connecticut Repertory Theater. So once I decided I was indeed going to do this program, I was like, nah, I got to go. I got to get that slot. I want to produce a main stage show. So I wrote and designed the puppets, built the puppets, and directed the puppets. One of my professors stage directed the actors. This is, again, a fully staged actors in roles, puppeteers, puppeteering in plain sight. Thank you. I wrote the play, and that was not my strongest suit. And it's funny because when I was an actor, this friend who introduced me to Underground Railway, and actually other people I've met along my travels, if you'd ask them, they'd say they were equally good in all their jobs. And small companies, they're producing, they're writing, they're directing, they're performing. And I could see instinctively looking at them that they were doing too much, right? And that they should scale back and do more at less. And then here I went, and I made the same mistake. The writing wasn't great, and I think I may revisit it someday. But what really thrilled me is that the reviewers loved the puppetry. They said this is where the play came alive every time the puppets were on stage, and that we left them wanting more. So that was pretty exciting.
That's very exciting.
I got some good photographs out of it.
Yeah.
So at this point, I mean, you can maybe I've already answered the question of what a puppeteer does. And this isn't every puppeteer, but a lot of us do it all. We design, build, perform, coach, teach, direct, produce. These are all things that I do. I'm never going to do them all at the same time, ever, ever, ever again. I promise. But primarily my business is design build. That's my bread and butter. When I went to UConn, they were all kind of enamored with me because I was an actor. And most of the people going into puppetry seemed to be non-actors. They didn't want to be on stage. They didn't want the focus on them. They wanted to hide behind a puppet. And I have moved more in that direction because I'm spending less time on stage. I think that's why I feel that way. But I still do love performing as a human character versus, maybe not versus, but as much as performing a puppet character, bringing an inanimate object to life.
Yeah.
I think that being a puppeteer, a performing puppeteer, a performer, has made me a better actor, because puppets have to be so specific in what they're trying to express.
Yeah.
And so, and I see that in my coaching as well.
I was just going to ask you about that. Like, how does that affect the way you coach actors?
It's really interesting. One of the last things I did in Massachusetts, maybe I should switch to me. Let's see how tech savvy I am this moment. There we go. So one of the last things I did in Cambridge was work on a small independent production. And the director asked me actually to coach a performer that she was having trouble with. And this woman is a wonderful director. She just kind of hit a roadblock with him, And what was happening was he was supposed to make his entrance and step in dog do, and then continue on, right? He couldn't sell it. He just couldn't sell it, and so I broke it down for him, and I could see very readily what was missing, because a puppet, you have to give it each and every beat. And with a puppet, you also have to separate each beat, because as human beings watching a puppet, it's an oddity, right? So our brains need a little bit more time to catch up. We can't watch a puppet in the same way that we watch a human being. We just need a little bit more time as audience members. So I was able to identify the beats that he was missing. And one that really is standing out in my memory right now is that he never fully recognized that he stepped in shit. He stepped in it, he tried to shrug it off, and he went on his way. And I'm like, no, give it some space, give it some time. Yeah. Really see the shit. Yeah. And when we were going through it, of course, like with anything else that you're having trouble finding, you make it bigger first, right? And then you can always pare it back. So I'm like, see it. Okay, you see it? Try and get it off. Get it off your foot. No, you missed some. There's still some there. Where is it? So we just really broke it down. And in 10 minutes, he was selling it. So that's one example of how I know that it has made me a better coach and performer.
Absolutely.
The specificity is one of the things that I really love about puppets.
Yes.
One of the other things I love, and I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. One of the other things I really love about it is that that puppets can embody metaphors that human beings can't embody, right? So when I talk to people and I say, what is it that you're trying? Maybe if I do this, no, that's not going to do. I'm trying to make the screen bigger for you. I don't know if anybody can give you advice, and then you can pass advice on to me from Facebook land.
Presentation, is there a presentation?
Well, before I clicked slideshow, and that's when it started doing its own thing.
On its own.
Play from current slide. Yeah, I don't want it to do timing on its own. Right. That's the problem.
That's all right. We can see it. Okay.
Okay. So one of the things, we talk about why a puppet. Why is this not a human character? And sometimes it's because it's an otherworldly beast. That's a pretty good answer. I'm going to tell you another story. I made puppets. One of my first gigs out of grad school was to build puppets for Christmas Carol, and you'll see some of these along the course of this slideshow. And just recently, the director said to me, I want a Tiny Tim puppet, because we only had Ghosts of Christmas Yet to Come, which is otherworldly, Ignorance and Want, which are otherworldly, and the Marley door knocker. So he said, I want a Tiny Tim puppet. I'm like, it's brilliant. It's brilliant, because let's face it, if Tiny Tim doesn't have the care and guidance and literally hand holding of the people who love him, he will die. Right. And nothing dies better when you let go of it than a puppet. So I was just like, I was so on board with the why a puppet for Tiny Tim. And he's like, oh yeah, and I won't have to pay an actor for the next 5 years. Don't tell anybody that.
Right.
So there's a good example of why a puppet. What kind of a puppet often is dictated. It can be dictated by the style of the show, the design of the show. It can be dictated by what the action is that the puppet needs to do. Something that's got to fly is going to be built something very differently than something that is very grounded.
Mm-hmm.
Materials can speak as well. And in this photo here, this person puppet is named Annie. And Annie could be anyone. Annie is non-gender, or at least that was the intent. Annie doesn't call out any ethnicity per se. And the reason for that is that this was going to be a community involvement kind of thing. I was right out on the street with this puppet. And I wanted the community to have an opportunity to engage with other. So at a glance, this puppet looks like a human being. And I cannot tell you how many people were like, whoa, I thought that was a person as they're walking by, because, out of the corner of your eye kind of a thing.
Right.
Proportions are very human. We can talk about that in another minute too. I generally don't like puppets that are human proportions. And it's because of that uncanny thing about puppets.
Right.
If they're too much like human beings, they just feel weird. Yeah, they really embrace the uncanniness. But that's what I wanted with this puppet. This is what I wanted with Annie. I wanted people to have an opportunity to engage with other, to feel that discomfort, and to move past it. My vision was that Annie would be sitting on a sidewalk with a sign that says, "Will you help?" And the end goal being dancing. Will you help Annie to dance? And it was really a lot of fun. And you can't see in this picture, but you'll see it later. Annie's skin is not black, is not white. It's both, because it's newspaper. And in the metaphor of that is, newspapers tell our stories.
Yes.
Good, bad, indifferent, otherwise. The stories are there inside of us, right on Annie's skin. So that's a powerful way that materials can serve as metaphors. And that's one of the things I love about puppetry, and one of the things I try and guide my clients to embrace, and not just have a puppet because it will save you money.
Right.
So what kind of puppets? Really anything that will get the job done, get the story told. There's a marionette. That's a wood-carved marionette. Hand puppets, something you slide your hand up the dress and have at it there. Rod puppets are generally tabletop. And just like the name says, they've got rods attached to their extremities, to their head, and you operate them that way. And Annie is a direct manipulation puppet. A lot of people will call that bunraku, but bunraku is a very specific Japanese tradition that takes many, many, many not years, a lifetime.
Yep.
To become proficient at in the ways that they hold the standards to. So I don't like when people use that term. Direct manipulation is what it is. You're holding on to the puppet directly with your body, your hands, and bringing it to life in that way. This was Annie's second performance. The first one was, as I said, on the street, engaging the public. And this time we choreographed a dance, and you can't really see her, but Wanda is in the background there. She was our choreographer and my partner. And Annie went back and forth between being manipulated between the two of us and engaging as a presence. So you can see here, we are looking at each other. And that, in terms of performance, that's in my book, the very most important thing. If you have any inanimate object and you want it to come to life, you need to give it focus.
Mm.
And depending on where the puppeteer's focus is and where the puppet's focus is, you can direct where the audience is looking. But the puppet, if it does not focus on what it's doing, it is dead.
Uh-huh.
And that's the bottom line. Breath is
Yeah.
also important, but focus for me is number one. So I also make giant puppets. This
Wow.
was a creature at an event at Franklin Park Zoo in Massachusetts, where people were, and this would be kind of a great thing to do now because you could do it social distancing.
Uh-huh.
People were wandering through, there was a storyline and lots of different giant puppets, and one of
Great.
the big monsters escaped, and it was very exciting. A Halloween kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I also do shadow puppetry. As you know, my beginnings in professional puppetry was doing shadows. This was another project I did with Wanda. The inspiration for this show, I should say, came from a painting in a museum. We were performing in that museum. We just used the painting as a starting point, and we came up with this story about an actress who was trying to make it big back in the noir days, 20s,
Yeah.
30s. And so the style was done very noir,
Nice.
film noir. How do I make all of these different things? Well, that lots of different ways, again, depending on the needs. So I've broken it down into different types of processes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody else calls it this. This is just the way my brain can make an organized, less of a mess of it.
Right.
So to me, subtractive processes is taking away. So any kind of carving, I've carved wood. I do a lot of carving of foam. Foam is great because it's lightweight and still structural,
Right.
whereas wood tends to be very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So here in the second to the left, you can see the head of Christmas Yet to Come from that first production that I did out of
Yeah.
school. And this guy here you can see my cursor, right?
Uh-huh.
Sharing my
Yes, we
screen?
can.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he's also carved polystyrene and carved foam, but he's got rods in him. So he's a rod puppet. And this guy here has yet to get a body. So somebody wants to see him as something, he's available.
He's so cute.
Okay, so then additive processes, opposite of subtractive, it's adding to things. So for me, the additive processes are usually modeling in clay and then taking it further. Clay doesn't make for good puppets. It's fragile, it's heavy. Even, clay's obviously the cure. There are some lighter weight ones now, but this is my preferred. And for Goblin Market, which was my, if you remember, it was my thesis show. This
Mm-hmm.
is one puppet that you can see going through the whole process. So there's the clay sculpt, and then a mold is made. And I've got an example here for you because I know that picture is not very clear. So this is the mold for Want, the little girl that appears under the legs of Christmas
Oh,
present.
yeah. Do you want to change your view? And then we'll be able to see it.
Right.
I know.
Sorry. I've been doing a lot of Zoom. I don't know why this is. I guess I've
I
never
think we're
shared
all
a
zoomed out.
slideshow.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
so there's the inside of the mold.
Mm-hmm.
The plaster is built up over the clay, and then the mold is made, and then neoprene liquid, which is a liquid, is poured into the mold.
Uh-huh.
And it dwells there a while, and the plaster pulls out the solvents. And then you pour off the excess, and you're left with a shell. So there's Want's face without her ears,
Uh-huh.
just in the neoprene shell.
Great.
So this was
Way lighter.
first clay,
Uh-huh.
and then plaster over it, and then now I can
Great
make as
demo.
many of her as need be without having to resculpt her. And neoprene is nice because if you don't let it dwell for too long, it's lightweight, it's structural. You can get inside there for mechanisms and things. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's one of my favorite ways to work.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Parrot that was done in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can also do a cast. So when you mold something, you're making the negative impression. And then what you pull out of it is the casting, right? So you can do a paper mache casting on top, directly on top of the clay, which is how this Blue Star Man was done. So I sculpted it in the clay, and he was enormous. He was like this. It was a lot of clay.
Yeah.
And I just paper mache'd very carefully over it because it was going to be a one-off. And we just needed that shell that we were going to mount on another structure. You lose some detail doing it that way, but it's especially when you're working large like this, it's a lot easier than making a plaster mold. Any is that blue styrofoam that you see. Let me get the, then I'll have to switch off again. They use it as insulation. You can see it's either blue or pink.
Oh, right.
Home Depot, big thick sheets. So that's what any is made of. It was a lot of layers laminated together, and then I carved Annie's features from there. And Annie's whole body is made that way to keep any lightweight.
Yeah. You can really see the newsprint on that one.
Yeah, you can see the newspaper, exactly, that was paper mache'd on top to give it a hard skin so that they wouldn't get damaged. So you can also paper mache inside of the mold, and that preserves the detail. There's lots of other products, Celluclay, that can be pressed into a mold. There's another one that I've come to really like, and now I can't think of the name. I'll think of it another time. Anybody who wants to build, you can write to me and I'll tell you. But so there are other ways to work in the negative mold and keep that detail that you get, because the plaster mold really does a good job of that. So other than additive and subtractive, I also use manipulative processes. This guy on the left is a paper sculpture. This is something I learned at UConn, and it's basically one sheet of paper that is folded and scored to create the entire head.
Wow.
And it gives it a very specific look. Anytime you see this method of paper sculpture, you'll see these ridges and this type of eye and things. That paper obviously has to be hardened and made permanent, which is a whole nother process. Years ago, I guess there was some kind of material that was not good for one's health, but great for this process, and they no longer make it. But there are other things like cosplayers use, and now I'm blanking on the name of it, the brown stuff. It's thermoplastics, basically, that you probably could use for this process. I tend to not do a lot of that because it's heat sensitive, and I don't want to ship off a puppet to someone, have them leave it in their car and come back to a gooey mess. So I tend to not use it, but it is very useful and fun to work with. You can also nip and tuck foam, and that's what this guy on the right is. It's just pinched and stapled.
So cute.
You could take that apart and make a pattern from it. And do proper gluing if you want. For something that's going to be used in a show, I wouldn't think that staples would suffice. This is a really fun project, and something that anybody can do, even people who say they don't have an artistic bone in their body, can do this process here that's in the middle. And that's basically soaking burlap in an adhesive mixture, and then draping it over form and just finding a face. So if you ever, there's a guy from England, gosh, I'm not thinking of any of the names of things or people.
That's all right.
Then he wrote a book on automatons. And in the book he says, as human beings, we are programmed to focus on movement. And if you ever saw the towel and you're here brushing your teeth, going, happily along, and suddenly your towel falls off the rack, right? You have to look, because it could be a lion that's going to eat you, right? So once that towel's on the floor in a heap, have you ever looked at it and just in the folds, oh, there's a face, or in a
Right.
cloud, or around here in a rock, you see a
Uh-huh.
very vivid face. We all have that ability to find a face. It's programmed into us. And
Mhm.
this process does that. It just encourages it. I've done it with a lot of students and everybody has a blast. So maybe we
Yeah,
should do
sounds like
that
a fun
sometime
project.
because it's real easy. These other two were more intentionally formed
Mhm.
into faces as a lamb and a face
Uh-huh.
mask. So you can do both with that process. And it results in a very breathable mask because of the
Oh,
holes
I
in the
bet.
burlap.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice. Um, so leather can also be manipulated. It's very laborious.
Is it?
I studied under Donato Sartori in Italy, um, who, oh God, I'm losing names again. Oh, who created the neutral mask
Mm. The commedia, it looks like
movement.
commedia. Yeah.
Well, think about that another time too. I have to make notes next time when I do.
I know,
um,
you're good.
so you have to sculpt it in wood first, carve,
Mhm.
subtractive, and then do a lot of working of the leather to get it to
Huh.
take on those contours.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why, folks, if you go to buy a leather mask, that's why it's expensive.
That's why
It's
it
a lot of
costs so
work.
much.
Yeah. So soft sculpture's another additive
Mhm.
process, but it's also manipulative because you can move things around like you do with uh, the burlap process that I showed you, or the nip and tuck. It's not like carving in wood when you cut off the nose. Well,
Right.
you can
Right.
put it back here.
You can move it
Um,
back. They're
so
so
this,
expressive, these ones.
thank you. So this little one was in my thesis project.
Oh.
Um, which came to be about connections with people.
Uh-huh.
And the first form the baby took was just a blanket, just a woven blanket that was all coming apart,
Hmm.
just unraveling, literally unraveling. And by the end of the show, when people are coming together, she takes full form.
Oh.
Now, this is a tooth fairy. I know you never met her before, but there she is
There
in
she
wolf
is.
flesh. And we won't talk about that one.
That's great, though.
45. You like his button?
Yeah, I love the button. I
Can you
love
read it?
me.
Yeah, I love me. Okay. So another technique, which is, I would say, I don't know how to classify flat patterning. I think we're just going to classify it as flat patterning. Um, is really good for giant puppets because you can scale it. So
Mm.
here I sculpted a head that was, I think I did 6 inches, maybe 4 inches.
Hmm.
And then create the pattern by putting a layer of either tinfoil or saran wrap, something that will hug the shapes, and
Uh-huh.
then put masking tape all over, burnish it down really well, and then cut out these pattern pieces.
Huh.
And I can show you one later after we stop the slideshow. I don't want to keep going back and
Okay.
forth. I can show you another model that's got that. And then the pattern pieces are blown up. I used to do it by overhead projector, but
Mm-hmm.
that creates more steps than necessary. So I do it digitally now.
Uh-huh.
And then, you just blow it up to whatever scale you need. This head is 4 feet tall.
Wow.
So this is one of the giant bobbleheads that I do. And he was
Yes.
part of this event at MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Yes.
Um,
That's
they,
great.
thank you. They had a big event to celebrate 100 years of having crossed the river from Boston. So there were 12 of these guys and gals.
Uh-huh.
That job nearly killed me.
I bet.
That was
They're
a lot of work.
fabulous.
That was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And the students that brought them to life were really fabulous. It was a
Mhm.
great event. So puppets can also be made from objects, right? Not just
Right.
fully formed. The show on the left, I remember I told you I was trying so hard to break into Underground Railway. Before I left, I got the opportunity to assistant direct and assistant design puppets.
Mm.
So Deborah Wise, who's the head of the company, was in the show. She needed an outside eye to help direct, so I did that. And her husband, David Fichter, was designing the puppets. we had a lot of puppets. So I ended up designing quite a few of them as well.
Mm.
And the whole premise behind that show, and that's the 1, 2, and 3 here. So it was Matchless and the Happy Prince. It was a combination of 2 shows. And if you know the stories, Matchless is about a little match girl. It's Dickens, back in turn of the last century, and or the century before the last. And character is very poor little match girl, and so they wanted to do everything with found objects. So it's poor theater. So this character here on the end is a politician, and they were depicted in the script as being drinkers. So these are all implements from a bar.
I love it.
This is the mathematician. I think he was in the other story. He may have been in the Happy Prince. Who is about a story. It's a story about a prince who dies young. They erect a statue of him overlooking the town. And he was a tender soul as a prince. He wondered why not everyone had what he did. He had such privilege, and it made him sad. Or maybe that wasn't in life. Maybe it was only as a statue that he realized the privilege he had, and then he was stuck. He couldn't do anything. And he befriended a bird that slowly took the jewels off of his sword, and then his clothing, and then finally his eyes. As a statue, he wanted everything, all the riches that were on him as a statue, to be shared with his people. So again, all found objects. The mathematician is all mathematical measuring implements. And the swallow, the bird, is driftwood.
Nice.
That a boy in the story collects. So that was really fun to work, metaphorically work thematically, and So these 2 colorful images on the right are from I was going to say a young company. They're not that young of a company, but they were new to me. A company in Boston who wanted to do a puppetry show on the green in Boston. The director came to me, said, "I want to rent some of your puppets." I'm like, okay, why puppets? So we had that conversation, and it kind of boiled down to puppets are cool, and we're going to be on the green, and I want to be able to attract young families. Right. So we moved past that very quickly. And I said, "So what's your story?" He didn't have a story. Okay. So, looking at all of my work, none of my puppets were going to suit what he was doing, because to be on the green, without a table, just on the ground, with lots of people gathering around, anything that's going to be low and small to the ground is going to be lost to everyone but the front row. Right. So I said, I don't have anything, but I think that we can, do this together. So I gave him homework. And I got that from Julie Goel. Gave him homework. I sent him away. I said, let's think about who your characters are first. So we basically, I hadn't sent him away yet. We're having a conversation. I said, "You're on the green. Who would be there?" He said, "Custodians." Great. So you've got custodians. Go home and gather everything that you can think of that custodians would have. And then we'll meet again. So we got together and we just basically played theater games. What are all the other things that these cleaning implements can become? And so they made up a laundry list of all the things that they could create. And from there came the story. These custodians were going to go on a quest. For what? For this little bird that they had made out of a pair of gloves. Great. This bird became the focus of the story. These 3 characters were very commedia-like. One found this bird, and kind of like the bird that laid the golden egg. It was valuable. This bird had value, so he wanted to keep it. And everybody else was saying, "No, the bird has to go. We have to let it go." And they're arguing about it. In the meantime, the bird goes. So the whole show becomes the quest to find the bird. And in the end, they let it go anyway. So it's great. I love it. So one of the creatures that they wanted and they couldn't create, they created the sword, and you can see that there. Maybe I can make it bigger. Oh, look, I can. Hey. Late's better than never, guys. They made a sword out of one of the mops. And they said, we want to have a pirate face. So this pirate face is made all from recycled detergent bottles.
That's
And
great.
it's just riveted together. So we had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, I bet it got attention on the green too.
It did. It was, all very bright colors, and a lot of silliness ensued. It's done very well. It's supposed to go to Scotland. Help me.
Edinburgh?
Edinburgh.
Yeah.
It's slated to go.
The Fringe
So,
Festival? Oh, nice.
yeah.
Great.
Okay, so that all being said, bottom line is puppets can be anything you want or need them to be. And that's part of the why, right? Why a puppet? In this case, this was for a parade that happens every year in Salem, Massachusetts.
Nice.
I'm in the wrong spot. Here we go. Oh, gosh. Darn, I'm just so bad at this. I'm
You're
sorry.
doing great.
There we go. I'll just move it.
Yeah.
So the National Park Service hired me because they're part of this parade that happens every year in Salem, Massachusetts. And they wanted a wow. The Park Service, oh my gosh, these guys are great. Guys and gals are great. They're very enthusiastic about their work, but they have a hard time getting other people to identify with why they and their service is important. So that was the goal. The theme of the parade was Hocus Pocus, the movie.
Right, that's what it is, yes.
Yeah, and I would have loved to have taken credit for this idea because it's a fabulous idea, but it was not mine. It was the superintendent of the National Park Service came to me and he said, I want Bette Midler to now be employed by the National Park Service. So that's how this came to be. And you can't see his face, but the lovely gentleman who was wearing the backpack, this puppet is 15 feet tall.
Wow.
And we need somebody who could handle that. And he was like a little kid. He was marching in this parade like he was like just the greatest. So I really felt glad, to make them happy. And it was the hit of the parade because it was really the only puppet. It was the first puppet appearing in that parade. And
that's great.
It's become a real focus for them. So this past year, my understanding is that they made a robot head because the theme had something to do with technology in the future. And so they made a robot in this costume. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So back to what puppets can be. Puppets can be creepy. These are the Christmas Carol puppets. Here's Future, Christmas Yet to Come, and Ignorance and Want.
Wow.
We call them Iggy and Wanta.
Wanta.
And puppets can be cute. Here's that one from my thesis. And she's walking, learning to walk with her caretaker. But they can even be creepy and cute. Now, that would be really challenging for an actor.
Yes.
Because it would turn out to just be creepy.
Right. It would just be creepy.
So puppets are also really good at transformations. And this is an example of shadows being able to create different worlds and transformations. So when we started rehearsing, really workshopping this show, we needed somebody to play a little girl. And I wasn't going to hire a little girl. I had no time for that. And I was like, this is crazy. I know we can do this in shadow. So I had one of my better movers behind the shadow screen, and she's trying all different kinds of qualities of movement, and she still looked like a woman. There was nothing she could do. Even a woman who had a very androgynous body still did not look like a child. So I went back to the drawing board and I'm like, what is it that says child to us? And what it is a change of proportions. Children's heads are proportionately larger parts of their whole.
Yeah.
Our heads don't grow that much. Our bodies do most of the growing. There is some growth. But a child might be 5 heads high or 6 heads high. And an adult is 8 heads high. So I made a mask, which I can run and get for you to show you later. and put that shadow mask on her, and suddenly she was very childlike.
Yes.
It was truly magical. And we did the same with the goblin, because in the dream, the goblin comes to this little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to change a human's profile and make him into a goblin.
Uh-huh.
Another dream sequence, a woman is having a dream of her mother that she lost at a very young age. And so that I wanted to be very ethereal and something of longing. And so this is what's called a reflective puppet. It's done on, usually reflective puppets are done on mirrored plastic. And the
Uh-huh.
good thing about that is that they can warp and change their shape. And you shine a light on it and you reflect that light from the mirror onto the shadow screen. That's
Huh.
usually how reflective puppets are done.
Cool.
This, I wanted more ethereal than that, because those are usually solid blocks of white. And you can
Uh-huh.
see this has some areas that are whiter than others. It almost feels
Yeah.
transparent at the same
Uh-huh.
time. And so I did this using a transparency. I
Uh-huh.
photoshopped an image and then had it printed onto film, and we shined the light through it. And
Wow.
it worked pretty well. I would have liked it to have been a brighter image. And you could see some parts of it got bright. It did its job as feeling dreamlike and ghostly. So that's another thing that puppets are good at. Shadows can be colorful. Who knew? With the plastics that we have nowadays and the transparent paints, um, you can have color in your shadow shows. So I've been asked in the past, you're a designer builder, do you also perform? Yes, I do. Um, some people will call themselves puppeteers and they don't design and build. That's more likely to happen than the reverse. So if you hear puppeteer, usually they do perform, and the question is, do you design and build?
Uh,
Whereas me, people know me first generally as a designer builder,
I
and it's the other
gotcha.
one. But puppeteers do that. So there you see me, and
Uh-huh.
now you don't. And this has been a thing in a lot of American shows. For a long while, my professor, the head of our department, he was adamant against puppeteers not being seen. That was just the way things were done for a long time. But the
Uh-huh.
European tradition is very different. First of all, there's a huge European tradition of puppetry. Europe,
Uh-huh.
well, not just European, Europe and everywhere else around the world. Obviously, we've already talked about Japanese puppetry.
Japanese,
Puppetry
yep.
has been in Asia a lot longer than even in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So those traditions don't feel like, like it's Sesame Street and they have to hide the puppeteer, right?
Uh-huh.
Sometimes the puppeteer is in plain sight, but either through the use of focus, or maybe the puppeteer maybe is a performer too. Um, the audience knows where to look. And
Mm-hmm.
my puppeteers for Goblin Market were in plain sight, but they themselves were not characters. And
Mm.
nobody looked at them. And we, in our talkbacks, people even said that. It's like, it's funny, when the puppets came on, I first thought, who do I look at? But almost immediately, I was glued to the puppet and I forgot the people were even there.
Uh-huh.
So this is something important that I think American puppeteers need to embrace.
Yep.
So some of my work has also appeared on screen. Right before I left, I did this one on the right. There's a horror show, a horror film
Hmm.
uh, in production now, and I did the puppetry for that. And it was all in shadow
Wow.
because the character, they never wanted to really directly see the character. That was part of his mystery
Uh-huh.
and horror.
Wow.
And then I also had something on the Smithsonian Channel. It was just an effigy burning, but
Uh-huh.
I'm in the credits.
That's awesome.
So a lot of my work is corporate, not a
Mm-hmm.
lot, a good portion is corporate. Here's some more of those big heads. Did this
Uh-huh.
for Mack Trucks. They had a in-house event, a huge one for all of their, across Volvo and Mack Trucks. They had drawn up, their marketing department had hired a cartoonist to
Mm-hmm.
draw up 4 characters that were technicians. And they created this comic book and a whole backstory for these guys. And they wanted them to be present at the event.
That's
So we
great.
built them. Puppets are great at bringing attention to a cause, especially the large ones. This one
Nice.
was back in Salem, Massachusetts again. There's an area called Artists Row, and they do a lot of community events. And their theme that year was bees, saving the bees. So there were bees
Uh-huh.
everywhere. This bee ended up being mounted as an interactive exhibit sort of thing, an interactive puppet. It was on I was going to say a fly line, but not a fly line. A long line, a long wire was suspended, and people could fly the bee back and forth.
Oh, wow.
Its wings flap and all that.
Oh,
So
cool.
I was just parading it down the street before it was installed.
Uh-huh.
And puppets can take you around the world. I've been to
Mm,
Canada. I've been to China. Been
uh-huh.
to Italy. It's really a fabulous way to meet people, but I wouldn't say, to wear your puppet to a convention and talk to people through your puppet. Not meet people in that way. Um,
Don't
the
do that.
performers perform in a way that isn't, because puppets can also, people think that they're very approachable, but they can be off-putting.
Yeah.
It's a fine line. It's a fine
Mm-hmm.
line.
Mm-hmm.
So since the pandemic, as you know, I was supposed to come in and work with you, and that had to
Right.
go away. And I was supposed to
Right.
work with another company, and that went away. But some interesting projects did crop up.
Uh-huh.
Um, this was for a festival called Puppets and Prose, put out by the LA Guild, I think, of Puppetry in collaboration with Rogue Artists Ensemble. They had done some writing courses or classes, and they chose some examples of the writing and then disseminated it amongst anyone who was willing and able to illustrate it. So this is Kuko, and it's about a snake that basically wants to be a dog. Um, so so that was fun. So
Great.
that's filmed. And then I also participated in Sofa Shakespeare. Have you seen that online?
I have heard about it, but I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to look this one up.
Yeah, so it's 1 minute excerpts of Shakespearean plays that are sent out amongst the people, and you can do your portion any way you like.
Nice.
So this
That's
is Hero from Much Ado About Nothing, and the Prince, and I can't remember Hero's betrothed name.
oh, I just blanked too.
Benedict? No, not Benedict. Benedict is the other couple.
Mhm.
And then I also did, you're seeing a theme here. Um, I also did a toy theater presentation. So toy theater is an old European tradition that people in their parlors would do for fun. They would have these little, basically theaters that are two-dimensional. And, they'd have paper puppets coming in and out. And
Uh-huh.
in its purest form, that's what toy theater is. It's two-dimensional puppets with a proscenium. And
Nice.
so I did this. It started out as a PSA because, as you know, I was a nurse in my
Uh-huh.
first professional life. And
Right.
I felt the need for more clear information to be out there about masks and hand washing and gloves.
Uh-huh.
But it quickly devolved into a political statement because Trump, had something to say about,
Right.
I feel fine. I don't need to wear masks. And we have 1 case and 5 cases and 15, and it's going down. We're going to be fine. So he does that. And there's another character you don't see here who is Soap Bob, who sounds and looks remarkably like SpongeBob. Um, he's telling everybody to wash up, though. And he gets to boot 45 off the stage.
That's great.
And he comes back and he says, that was very satisfying. Yes. So this is pretty much the end of it. Coming soon, this is the show I was supposed to work on with Audacious Theater. It was Wonderland, a black light adventure down the rabbit hole.
Whoa.
Hopefully I will be designing and building the puppets for that show.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever get to meet again in indoor venues.
Yes.
And that's it.
Okay. Oh, wow. Those are so amazing. They're so
Thank you.
incredible, Penny. That's
Thanks.
that I was trying to remember. There was one thing you were going to show us when we came back. I forget
Right,
what it
the
was.
model, I think. So here's an example. So this is actually the base of the bee,
Oh, wow.
base form for the bee. I mean, you can see, so here it's sculpted in clay, and then I covered it with the tape and made the pattern pieces.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
basically,
It's just so
off.
innovative.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. People have been doing this process for a long time. So it comes
Yeah.
off and you just cut it in a way that it can lay flat, and then you
Uh-huh.
have a pattern.
Great. Wow. Well, I really, really hope that we'll have a chance soon at Red Rocks to bring you
I hope
in
so.
and on a production. And in the meantime, we're going to have you visiting our classes this fall.
You
Uh,
bet.
for sure, theater appreciation and maybe some of the other ones. It's so exciting that you were doing corporate stuff as well as plays, as well as, complete street theater,
Mm.
fringe, all of that. There's so many opportunities for puppets, and I feel like our actors, like you said, we could really learn a lot about acting by working puppets and finding out what those acting beats really are.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time. We may have questions that show up later, and I will connect you with any of those.
Okay.
We'll also put an edited version of this up on YouTube soon.
Okay.
So I appreciate you taking the time this
My
Thursday
pleasure.
evening.
Thank
Thanks.
you.